first time Tegan saw him, he was standing outside her apartment building in the rain, motionless as a statue, water running down the collar of his dark coat. She didn't think much of it then. Brooklyn was full of strange men doing strange things at strange hours. She hurried past him with her keys already in hand, the way she'd been taught since childhood, eyes forward, pace quick but not panicked. The second time, he was across the street from the cafe where she worked. Same coat, same stillness, same unreadable expression that seemed carved from stone rather than flesh. That's when the unease began to settle in her chest like cold water. By the third time, Tegan knew something was very wrong. She confronted him on a Tuesday evening, her fear finally outweighing her caution. He didn't run, didn't make excuses. He simply looked at her with eyes the color of winter sky and said in a voice touched with the faintest trace of an accent, "My name is Yarek. I've been assigned to protect you." Tegan laughed, actually laughed right there on the sidewalk because what else could she do with something so absurd? "Protect me from what? I'm a barista. I have student loans and a dying succulent. Who would possibly want to hurt me?" Yarek didn't smile. "Your father." The words hung between them like smoke. Tegan felt the ground shift beneath her feet, felt her entire understanding of her life tilt sideways. Her father had died when she... Car accident, that's what her mother had always said. Quick, painless, gone. "My father is dead," she said, but even as the words left her mouth, she heard the uncertainty in them. "No," Yarek replied simply. "He is not." That night, sitting in her tiny apartment with this stranger who had apparently been watching her for weeks, Tegan learned that her entire childhood had been built on careful lies. Her father wasn't dead. He was very much alive, running one of the most powerful operations on the East Coast. Her mother hadn't been protecting her from grief. She'd been protecting her from a world that devoured innocence and spat out survivors. "Why now?" Tegan asked, her coffee growing cold in her hands. "Why does he suddenly care after 20 years? Yarek's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "There was an incident. Names were mentioned. Your name. People who would use you to get to him now know." "So he sent you?" "Yes. And you just do whatever he says?" Something flickered across Yarek's face then, too quick to identify. "I owe him my life. I pay that debt by protecting yours." The arrangement was non-negotiable. Yarek would stay close. Not in her apartment, he assured her when he saw the alarm in her eyes, but nearby, always nearby. She would continue her life as normally as possible. Work, friends, routines. But he would be there in the background, a silent shadow between her and whatever danger her father's world might bring. Tegan wanted to refuse, wanted to call the police, pack a bag, disappear into a different city with a different name. But Yarek's eyes held something that stopped her, something ancient and knowing. "If you run," he said quietly, "they will find you faster than I can, and I am very fast." So began the strangest year of Tegan's life. At first, his presence was... She couldn't walk to the corner store without spotting him a careful distance behind. Couldn't grab drinks with coworkers without seeing him at the bar, nursing a single glass of something clear, never drinking enough to dull his watchfulness. She resented him, resented her father, resented the whole impossible situation that had turned her ordinary life into something from a film she'd never wanted to audition for. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, her anger began to shift. She noticed small things. The way Yarek always positioned himself between her and the street when they walked. How he somehow knew her coffee order despite never asking, leaving it on her doorstep on mornings when she'd overslept. The night she came home late from a double shift to find her building's broken front lock repaired, and though he never said anything, she knew. He never spoke unless necessary, never smiled, never offered information about himself beyond the bare minimum. But he was there, constant, unmovable, and somewhere in the repetition of days, Tegan stopped seeing him as an invader and started seeing him as something else entirely. Winter came to Brooklyn with bitter winds and early darkness. Tegan's mother had been calling more frequently, her voice tight with worry she tried to hide. They didn't talk about the truth. They never had. Instead, they spoke in the coded language of women who loved each other but couldn't bridge the gap of old lies and new realities. "Are you safe?" her mother would ask. "Yes," Tegan would answer, looking at Yarek standing by her window, his silhouette dark against the city lights. "Are you happy?" That question was harder to answer. One night in December, Tegan made a decision that surprised even herself. She knocked on the door of the apartment across the hall, the one Yarek had quietly rented 3 months prior. He answered immediately, fully dressed despite the late hour, alert in the way she'd learned meant he never truly rested. "Teach me," she said. His eyebrows drew together a question. "Teach me to protect myself. If I'm going to live like this, I should know how. For a long moment, Yarrick studied her, and Tegan held his gaze, refusing to look away. Finally, 6 in the morning. She expected him to teach her to fight. Instead, he taught her to think, how to read a room in 3 seconds, how to identify exits, how to recognize danger in body language, in the weight of a look, in the silence between words. He taught her that survival wasn't about strength. It was about awareness. They fell into a new rhythm. Early mornings in the small gym 2 blocks over, Yarrick's patient voice guiding her through scenarios she prayed she'd never. Long walks through the city where he'd quietly point out details she'd never noticed before. The man checking his phone too many times. The car that had circled the block twice. The woman whose eyes moved too quickly. "You see now," he said one evening as they stood on the Brooklyn Bridge, the city sprawling beneath them like a circuit board of light. "You cannot unsee." He was right. The world had changed. Or maybe Tegan had changed, and the world had simply revealed itself. It was during these hours together that she began to see past the careful walls Yarrick had built around himself. She learned he'd grown up in Moscow, that he'd lost his family young, that he'd made choices he couldn't take back in order to survive. He never offered these pieces freely. They emerged slowly, reluctantly, like confessions whispered in the dark. "Do you regret it?" she asked him once. "The life you chose?" Yarrick was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that made her chest ache. "I did not choose. I was chosen. There is a difference." Tegan understood that difference now. She hadn't chosen this either, but somehow, impossibly, she was starting to choose him. The realization came on a February night when she'd caught a cold that left her feverish and weak. She woke in the early hours to find Yarrick sitting in the chair beside her bed, his presence so still she might have dreamed him if not for the glass of water on her nightstand and the cool cloth he'd left folded nearby. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered, her voice rough. "No," he agreed. "I should not." But he didn't leave, and Tegan, in her fever-addled state, reached for his hand. His fingers were warm and calloused and surprisingly gentle as they closed around hers. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. Something had shifted between them, some invisible line crossed that could never be uncrossed. Spring arrived with the kind of beauty that made Tegan's heart hurt. Cherry blossoms in the park, longer days, the promise of new beginnings. But with it came a tension she couldn't name, a sense of something building just beyond her sight. Yarrick became more vigilant. She noticed the way his eyes tracked movements more sharply, the way he kept his phone closer, the way he seemed to be waiting for something inevitable and unwelcome. "What's wrong?" she finally asked him one morning. "Nothing," he said, but Tegan had learned to read the micro-expressions that crossed his usually impassive face. "Don't lie to me, Yarrick, not now." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. Fear. "For her, there are complications," he said carefully. "Situations that are developing. My father, among others." Tegan felt the familiar anger rise in her throat. "I'm tired of being protected from information. If something's happening, I deserve to know." Yarrick ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration she'd seen perhaps twice in the entire year she'd known him. "Your father's position is being challenged. There are people who believe removing you would weaken him. They are wrong, but that will not stop them from trying." The words should have terrified her. 6 months ago they would have, but Tegan had changed. She'd spent a year learning to see the world as it truly was. She'd spent a year with a man who'd shown her, through actions more than words, what it meant to stand between someone and the dark. "So we deal with it," she said simply. "Tegan, I'm not running, I'm not hiding. We deal with it together." Something broke open in Yarrick's expression then, some carefully maintained distance finally crumbling. He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the faint scar above his left eyebrow, the tired lines around his eyes, the weight of everything he carried. "You do not understand what you are saying," he said quietly. "The cost of staying, the things you might have to witness, the person you might have to become. Then help me understand." "I cannot." His voice was rough, almost pained. "Because if I do, if I truly show you what this world is, you will see me as I actually am, and I am not certain I could bear that." Tegan reached up, her hand trembling slightly as she touched his face. Yarrick froze, every muscle in his body going rigid with something that looked like agony and relief tangled together. "I already see you," she whispered. "I've been seeing you for months now, the man who leaves me coffee, who fixed my lock, who taught me to protect myself instead of making me helpless, who sits beside my bed when I'm sick. I see you, Yarrick, all of you. You see what I have allowed you to see. No, I see what you can't hide anymore." The kiss, when it came, felt inevitable and impossible all at once. Yarek's restraint finally breaking, his hands gentle despite the tremor in them, his mouth against hers tasting like regret and longing, and every word he'd never let himself speak. Tegan pulled him closer, desperate to close the distance that had existed between them for so long, desperate to prove that she meant what she said. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Yarek rested his forehead against hers. "This is a mistake," he said, but his hands were still on her waist, still holding her like something precious. "Probably," Tegan agreed, "but I'm tired of being careful." "I am not. I know, it's one of the things I love about you." The word hung between them, too big and too true to take back. Yarek's eyes searched hers, looking for doubt, for fear, for any sign that she didn't understand what she was saying. But Tegan held his gaze steadily, letting him see everything she felt. "You cannot love me," Yarek said finally, his accent thicker with emotion. "I am not built for love. I am built for following orders, for violence, for the kinds of choices that destroy good people. That's not all you are." "Not to me." Yarek pulled away then, and the loss of his warmth felt like winter returning. "Your father sent me to protect you, that is all. When this is over, I will leave. I will go back to my life and you will go back to yours. What if I don't want that? What you want does not matter." The words were harsh, but Tegan heard the pain beneath them. "What you need is to survive this, to be free of this world. I cannot give you that if I am selfish enough to keep you. You don't get to decide what I need. In this, I do." The argument ended there, both of them too raw to continue, but something fundamental had changed. They'd crossed a line and there was no pretending otherwise. The next few weeks were a special kind of torture. Yarek maintained his distance, professional and careful, but Tegan could see the cracks in his armor. The way his eyes followed her. The way his hands would clench when she walked past. The way he seemed to be fighting a war with himself every moment they were together. She didn't push. She'd said what needed to be said. The rest was up to him. The call came on a Wednesday night. Tegan was closing the cafe, counting out the register while rain hammered against the windows. Yarek was outside, as always, a dark shape beneath the awning across the street. Her phone buzzed with an unknown number. She almost didn't answer. But something, some instinct Yarek had taught her, made her pick up. "Tegan." The voice was deep, accented, unfamiliar yet somehow known. "Do not speak, only listen. You are in danger, greater danger than Yarek has told you. In 10 minutes, men will arrive at your location. They will not be there to talk." "Who is this?" But even as she asked, she knew. "I am your father, and I am sorry for many things, but there is no time for apologies now. Yarek will protect you. Do exactly as he says. Do you understand?" "Yes." The line went dead. Tegan's hands were shaking as she grabbed her coat and bag. Through the window, she saw Yarek suddenly stiffen, his hand moving to his phone. Then his head snapped up, his eyes finding hers across the distance, and she saw raw fear cross his face. He was moving before she could react, crossing the street with frightening speed, throwing open the cafe door. "We need to leave, now." "My father called." "I know." Tegan didn't argue. She'd learned to trust that tone, that urgency. They went out the back exit into the alley, rain immediately soaking through her jacket. Yarek's hand was firm on her elbow, guiding her quickly but not running, not yet drawing attention. "What's happening?" "A move has been made, earlier than expected. They are accelerating their timeline." "Who are they?" "People who believe your death sends a message." The words were blunt, brutal, and exactly what Tegan needed. No more protection from the truth. They reached Yarek's car, parked 2 blocks away in a location she realized now he'd specifically chosen for quick escape. He opened her door, waited until she was inside, then moved around to the driver's seat with economical grace. The drive was silent except for the rain and the occasional direction Yarek spoke into his phone in rapid Russian. Tegan watched the familiar streets of Brooklyn give way to unfamiliar highways, then to roads she didn't recognize at all. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere safe." "That's not an answer." "It is the only answer I have right now." They drove for 2 hours, finally pulling up to a small house set back from the road, surrounded by trees that looked black in the darkness. Yarek killed the engine and sat for a moment, his hands still on the wheel, his jaw tight. "I need you to stay here," he said finally. "Do not leave this house. Do not answer the door unless you hear my voice. There is food in the kitchen, a phone that cannot be traced. Use it only for emergencies." "You're leaving." "I have to. There are things I must handle." "No," Tegan's voice was firm. "You don't get to bring me here and then disappear, not this time." Rick turned to face her, and in the dim light from the dashboard she saw exhaustion and determination warring in his expression. If I stay, I cannot protect you. I must deal with the threat at its source. Then I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. You don't get to decide that. In this, I do. He reached over, his hand cupping her face with devastating gentleness. Please, Tegan, please let me do this. Let me keep you safe. And what about keeping you safe? You are to me. Yarrick closed his eyes briefly, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. That is why I must go, because you are important to me and I cannot risk you. Not for anything. Not even for my own selfish desire to stay. Yarrick, he kissed her then, soft and desperate and final. When he pulled away, his eyes were bright with something that might have been tears if he allowed himself such things. I will come back. I promise you that. But right now, I need you to trust me and let me go. Every instinct Tegan had screamed against it, but she'd learned over this year to recognize when Yarrick was immovable, when his decisions came from a place deeper than stubbornness or control. This was about survival. Hers. Maybe his, maybe both. Come back to me, she whispered. Always. He waited until she was inside the house, watching through the window as his taillights disappeared into the darkness. The silence that followed was absolute. The hours that followed were the longest of Tegan's life. She paced the small house, her mind running through every terrible possibility. She tried to sleep and couldn't, tried to eat and couldn't. The phone Yarrick had mentioned sat on the kitchen counter, silent and accusatory. Dawn came gray and cold. Still no word. By noon, Tegan had mapped every inch of the house, identified every exit, every window, every potential weapon the way Yarrick had taught her. By sunset, she was seriously considering breaking her promise and leaving. Then she heard the car. She was at the window in seconds, her heart hammering. But the figure that emerged from the vehicle wasn't Yarrick. It was a woman, older, elegant in the kind of way that spoke of old money and older power. She walked to the door with complete confidence, as though she owned not just this house but everything around it. Tegan didn't open the door. Who are you? My name is Katerina. I am a friend of Yarrick's. He asked me to bring you something. He would have called. He cannot call. Not right now. Please open the door. I mean you no harm. Something in the woman's voice made Tegan pause. Not kindness exactly, but a kind of weary honesty that reminded her of Yarrick. Slowly, carefully, she opened the door. Katerina stepped inside, her eyes scanning the space with professional efficiency before settling on Tegan. You are very much like your mother, she said unexpectedly. She had the same stubbornness, the same fire. You knew my mother? Once, a lifetime ago. Katerina reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. Yarrick wanted you to have this, in case things do not go as planned. The fear that had been living in Tegan's chest since last night crystallized into something sharp and cold. What do you mean, in case? He has gone to negotiate, to end this threat permanently. Such negotiations are unpredictable. Take me to him. I cannot. Then tell me where he is. Katerina's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Child, if I do that, I put both of you at greater risk. Yarrick knew what he was doing when he brought you here. Which is what? Get himself hurt. Get himself. Tegan couldn't finish the sentence. Survive, Katerina said simply. He is very good at surviving, better than anyone I have known. But this time he has something to survive for. That makes him either more dangerous or more vulnerable. We will see which. She left as quietly as she'd arrived, the envelope sitting on the table between them like a grenade. Tegan stared at it for a long time before finally opening it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, Yarrick's handwriting angular and precise. Tegan, if you are reading this, something has gone wrong. I want you to know that this year with you has been the first time I have felt like something other than a weapon. You made me remember what it is to be human, to want things, to hope for things. I cannot give you the life you deserve. I cannot promise you safety or normalcy or any of the things you should have. But I can promise you this. Every decision I have made, every choice has been to protect you. Not because I was ordered to, but because I choose to. There is money in an account. Details are with Katerina. Use it to disappear if you need to. Build a new life far from this world. Be happy. Be free. Be everything I cannot be. And if I do not come back, please know that loving you is the bravest thing I have ever done. Why? Tegan read it 3 times, tears streaming down her face before carefully folding it and putting it in her pocket. Then she did the only thing she could do. She waited. Night fell again. Then dawn. Another day of silence. Another night of pacing and fear and the terrible understanding that she might have already lost him. On the 3rd day, when Tegan had almost convinced herself to break every promise and every rule, she heard it, the sound of an engine. the particular rhythm of footsteps she'd memorized over 12 months of constant proximity. She was at the door before he could knock, throwing it open to find Yarrick standing there, looking more exhausted than she'd ever seen him, a dark bruise spreading across his jaw, his eyes holding shadows that hadn't been there before. "You're alive," she breathed. "I made a promise." Then she was in his arms, and he was holding her so tightly she could barely breathe, his face buried in her hair, his body trembling with something that might have been relief or delayed fear or both. "It's over," he said into her shoulder. "Truly over. You are safe now. And you. I am here." They stayed like that for a long time, neither willing to let go, neither ready to face what came next. Finally, Tegan pulled back enough to see his face. "What happened?" Yarrick's expression was complicated, layers of emotion she couldn't quite parse. An agreement was reached, terms were set, the threat has been neutralized. At what cost? That is not something you need to carry. Yarrick, please. His hands framed her face, his eyes pleading. "Let me carry this, let me keep this from you. It is the last thing I can protect you from." Tegan wanted to argue. But she saw in his face that whatever had happened over those 3 days had fundamentally changed something in him, had carved new lines of weariness into his features. So instead, she nodded. "Okay." They went inside together, and Yarrick sat heavily on the small couch, his head dropping back against the cushions. Tegan sat beside him, taking his hand, lacing their fingers together. "Your father wants to meet you," Yarrick said after a long silence. The words hit her like a physical. "What?" "He has asked if you would be willing. No pressure, no obligation, just a conversation. After 20 years of nothing, he wants a conversation. He wants to explain and to apologize and to give you a choice about what happens next." "What choice?" Yarrick turned to look at her, his expression unbearably gentle. "Whether you want any part of his life or whether you want to walk away completely, he will support either decision. I will support either decision." Tegan felt the weight of it settle over her. A choice. After a year of having no choice, of being swept along by forces beyond her control, she was being offered agency again. "What do you think I should do?" she asked quietly. "I think," Yarrick said slowly, "that you should do whatever your heart tells you, not what I want, not what your father wants, not what anyone else thinks you should do. You have earned that right." "Nuss, what happens to us?" Yarrick was quiet for so long that Tegan felt her heart begin to crack. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "I am yours for as long as you will have me, if you want me, if you can accept what I am and what I have done, but I will not hold you to anything. You deserve the freedom to choose." "I choose you," Tegan said without hesitation. "I chose you months ago. I choose you now. I will choose you tomorrow and every day." "You do not know what you are choosing." "Yes, I do. I'm choosing the man who protected me for a year without asking for anything in return. The man who taught me to be strong instead of keeping me weak. The man who risked everything to keep me safe. The man who looks at me like I'm worth saving. I know exactly what I'm choosing, Yarrick, do you?" Something broke in his expression then, 20 years of walls crumbling all at once. "I choose you too," he whispered. God. The kiss was different this time. Not desperate or stolen or weighted with goodbye. This was a promise, a beginning, an acknowledgement of everything they'd survived to reach this moment. When they finally broke apart, both of them were crying silently, foreheads pressed together, breathing the same air. "What happens now?" Tegan asked. "Now," Yarrick said, "we decide together, every step, every choice, no more secrets, no more protection from the truth. We face whatever comes as partners." "Partners," Tegan repeated, tasting the word. "I like that. Good, because I am not very good at this, at opening up, at trusting, at being with someone who sees me. Then we'll learn together." They stayed in that small house for another week, recovering from the trauma of those 3 days, slowly learning how to be together without the constant threat hanging over them. Yarrick told her more about his past, about the choices he'd made and the weight he carried. Tegan told him about her fears, her anger at her father, her complicated grief for the normal life she'd never had. It wasn't easy. Some conversations ended in tears, some in frustrated silence, but they kept choosing to stay, to work through it, to build something real from the foundation of fear and necessity that had brought them together. Finally, Tegan decided she was ready. Ready to meet the man who'd shaped her life from a distance for 20 years. Ready to hear his ready to make her choice about the future. The meeting was arranged at a neutral location, a restaurant closed for a private event. Yarrick drove her there, his hand steady on hers the entire way. "I will be right outside," he said as they pulled up. "If you need me, if anything feels wrong, you leave, no questions, no obligations. Come with me. This is something you need to do alone. Please, Yarrick, I need you there." He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. The man waiting for them inside was older than Tegan expected, with graying hair and eyes that held the same weariness she'd seen in Yarek. He stood when they entered, his hands nervous, his expression uncertain in a way that seemed foreign to someone who allegedly controlled so much. "Tegan," he said, and his voice was the same one she'd heard on the phone. "Thank you for coming." She didn't move closer, didn't offer any warmth. Just stood there with Yarek's solid presence beside her and waited. Her father seemed to understand. He gestured to the table. "Will you sit, please?" They sat, the three of them forming a strange triangle of connected lives and complicated loyalties. For a long moment, no one spoke. Finally, her father cleared his throat. "I do not expect forgiveness. I do not even ask for it. I only want you to understand why I made the choices I made." "So explain," Tegan said, her voice harder than she felt. What followed was a story of impossible choices and terrible love. Her father spoke of falling in love with her mother, of trying to leave the life he'd been born into, of believing he could build something normal and safe. He spoke of enemies who saw weakness in that love, who threatened everything he cared about. He spoke of the night he'd faked his death, of watching from a distance as his daughter grew up without him, of the constant war between his desire to be part of her life and his need to keep her safe from his world. "Your mother and I agreed," he said quietly. "Better you think me dead than live in constant fear. Better you have a chance at a normal life than be dragged into this darkness." "But I was dragged into it anyway," Tegan said. "All your protection, all your distance, and here I am regardless. I know, and I am sorry. Sorrier than I have words for. Why now? Why reach out now after all this time?" Her father's eyes met hers, and she saw genuine pain there. "Because the alternative was losing you permanently. And I am many things, Tegan, many terrible things. But I am also a father who loves his daughter, even if I have no right to that love." Tegan felt tears burning behind her eyes. Part of her wanted to rage at him, to make him feel every year of absence, every lie, every stolen moment. But another part, the part that had spent a year learning about impossible choices and the weight of survival, understood more than she wanted to. "I don't know if I can forgive you," she said honestly. "I don't know if I can ever see you as a father, but I'm willing to try to understand." Her father nodded, his own eyes bright. "That is more than I deserve." They talked for hours after that, not about forgiveness or family or any of the big things, just small things. Questions Tegan had wondered about her whole life, stories her father had carried alone. Yarek sat quietly beside her, offering support through presence rather than words, his hand occasionally finding hers under the table. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the windows, Tegan asked the question she'd been holding. "What happens now? What do you expect from me?" "Nothing," her father said simply. "I expect nothing. But I offer this if you want to know me to be part of my life in whatever small way you can tolerate, I would be honored. If you prefer to walk away and never speak to me again, I will respect that completely. The choice is entirely yours. And my safety. The threat is gone, permanently. You can go back to your life, back to being just Tegan. No shadows, no." Glanced at Yarek. "Unless you choose otherwise." Tegan looked at Yarek, seeing the question in his eyes. She knew what he was asking without words. Did she want him to stay? Not as a bodyguard, not as an assignment, but as himself, as the man she'd chosen and who had chosen her. "I want both," she said finally, looking between them. "I want to get to know you slowly, carefully, on my terms, and I want Yarek in my life, not protecting me, just with me." Her father smiled, the expression transforming his face into something almost gentle. "Then that is what you will have." They left shortly after, Tegan and Yarek walking out into the evening air together. For the first time in a year, Tegan felt like she could breathe fully. The weight of unknowing, of constant vigilance, of fear had lifted. "Are you okay?" Yarek asked as they reached the car. "I don't know," Tegan said honestly. "Ask me again in a month, maybe a year." "I will be here to ask." "I know." They drove back to Brooklyn in comfortable silence, the city lights welcoming them home. Tegan's apartment had never looked so good, so normal, so beautifully ordinary. Inside, Yarek hesitated at the door, the old uncertainty creeping back. "I should let you rest." "Stay," Tegan said. "Not across the hall, here with me." "Tegan, I'm not asking you to be anything other than what you are. I'm just asking you to stay." Yarek searched her face, looking for doubt, for fear, for any sign she didn't mean it. But Tegan held his gaze steadily, letting him see everything she felt. "Okay," he said finally. "I will stay." That night, they sat together on her small couch, Tegan curled into Yarek's side, his arm around her shoulders, both of them watching the city lights through her window. They didn't talk about the future or make grand plans. They just existed together in the quiet aftermath of everything they'd survived. "Thank you," Tegan said softly. "For what?" "For seeing me, for teaching me, for staying." Yarrick pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "Thank you for choosing me when I could not choose myself." The weeks that followed fell into a new kind of rhythm. Tegan went back to work, reclaiming the ordinary pieces of her life, but now Yarrick wasn't a shadow in the background. He was present, learning how to be part of her world instead of protecting her from it. It wasn't always easy. Yarrick struggled with the concept of normalcy, with letting his guard down, with believing he deserved the happiness he'd found. Tegan struggled with the weight of knowledge she now carried, with integrating her father into her understanding of her life, with balancing who she'd been with who she was becoming. But they worked through it together. Therapy helped, though it took weeks to find someone who understood their unique situation. Long walks helped, the city they both knew so well becoming the backdrop for honest conversations and hard truths. Time helped most of all. Slowly, carefully, Tegan began building a relationship with her father. Monthly dinners at first, always in public places, always with clear boundaries. They talked about books, about the city, about her mother who he still loved despite everything. They avoided the details of his work, the specifics of his world. Some things they agreed were better left in the dark. 6 months after that first meeting, Tegan's father asked if she'd visit her mother with him. It was the first time they'd be together as a family since she was 7 years old. The reunion was hard. Tears were shed, old wounds reopened, difficult truths spoken aloud. But there was also healing, understanding, the beginning of something that might eventually become. Through it all, Yarrick was her constant, learning to smile more, to relax, to believe that he could be something other than a weapon. He got a job doing security consulting, using his skills in legal ways that didn't require him to carry the weight of life and death decisions. A year after that terrible Wednesday night when everything changed, Tegan and Yarrick moved in together officially. Not because they had to, not because of fear or necessity, but because they chose to. Because they'd built something real from the ashes of impossible circumstances. Standing in their new apartment, surrounded by boxes and possibilities, Tegan looked at Yarrick and saw the future she'd never let herself imagine during that first year. A future built on choice rather than obligation, on love rather than duty. "Are you happy?" she asked him. Yarrick considered the question seriously, the way he considered everything. Then he smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his entire face. "Yes," he said simply, "I am happy." "Good," Tegan said, moving into his arms. "So am I." They'd been forged in fire, tested by fear, bound by circumstances neither of them had chosen. But what they'd built from those impossible beginnings was entirely their own. A love that was real and hard-won and worth every moment of uncertainty that had brought them here. Outside, the city hummed with its eternal. Inside, two people who'd found each other in darkness stood together in the light they'd created, ready to face whatever came next. Together, always together. And that, Tegan thought as Yarrick held her close, was more than enough. It was everything, high loves. "Thank you so much for staying with me until the very end of this story. I know it was long, I know it was heavy at times, but that's exactly how I wanted it to be, you know. Real. Raw, human. I wanted to write something that showed how complicated love can be when it's born from impossible circumstances. How people can find each other even in the darkest places. How we're all just trying to survive, and sometimes, if we're incredibly lucky, we find someone who makes us want to do more than just survive. Tegan and Yarrick's story. It stayed with me while I was writing it. The idea that protection could turn into something deeper. That someone could see past all your walls and still choose to stay. That love doesn't have to be easy to be real. I'd love to know what you thought. Did their journey feel authentic to you? Were there moments that hit you harder than others? Did the ending feel right? I'm genuinely curious about what resonated with you, what made you feel something. Drop a comment and let me know your thoughts. And if you made it this far, seriously, thank you. Your time is valuable and you spent it here with me, with them, and that means the world. Until next time, take care of yourselves. Choose the people who choose you back, and remember that the best love stories aren't the easy ones. They're the ones worth fighting for.